another Teacher Time with Kelsie. It is Monday, and usually today I will give you some ideas of things that you can include in your stories at home or just when you're telling stories with your family. But today I really just wanted to share a story with you that I enjoy telling and that I know a lot of you enjoy hearing. So this story is from the Bev Boss Chance Finger Plays and Stories book, which I know I've mentioned a few times before. So if you really like this story, this is another one that you can find in there. Before we get started, I'm just going to say to grab your favorite drink, find a cozy spot, and get ready for our story. Here we go. This is the Hairy, Scary Monster. In the land of the Hairy, Scary Monster, there also lived a mama mouse and her 4 mouse children. One day after a long day at work, the mama mouse was so tired and so thirsty, but they didn't have any water. So the mama mouse looked at her oldest mouse and she said, "Please, will you take this pail down to the creek and get us some water?" But the oldest mouse just looked at her and said, "But Mama, I don't want to go. I'm afraid of the hairy, scary monster that lives in the cave." The mama mouse looked at her oldest mouse and she said, "I'm sure you'll think of something." So the oldest mouse took the pail and tiptoed out of the house, down the hill, to the creek, when the hairy, scary monster yelled, "I'm going to come out and get you." The oldest mouse got so scared that they threw the pail and ran and hid behind a tree. Well, after a long time, the mama mouse started to think, "I wonder what happened." So she asked her second mouse. She said, "I'm still so thirsty. Will you take this pail and go down to the creek and fetch us some water?" The second oldest mouse said, "But Mama, I don't want to go. I'm afraid of the hairy, scary monster that lives there." The mama mouse just looked at that second oldest mouse and said, "Don't worry. I know you'll think of something." The second oldest mouse decided to try. They took the pail and they ran as fast as they could down the hill to the creek. But before they got there, the hairy, scary monster yelled, "I'm going to come out and get you." The second mouse got so scared that she took the pail and threw it, and she ran and hid behind a tree. Well, after a while, the mama was sitting there thinking, I wonder what happened to those first 2 mice. But she was still thirsty, so she asked her third oldest mouse. She said, "Can you take this pail and go down to the creek and get us some water?" The third oldest mouse looked at her and said, "But Mama, I don't want to go. I'm too afraid of the hairy, scary monster that lives in the cave." The mama mouse looked at her baby and she said, "Don't worry. I'm sure you'll think of something." So, the third oldest mouse grabbed the pail and they walked very slowly down the hill and tried to walk slowly behind the hairy, scary monster's cave. But as they were walking behind it, right before they got to the creek, the hairy, scary monster yelled, "I'm gonna come out and get you." The third oldest mouse got so scared that they threw the pail and ran and hid behind a tree. Well, now it had been a really long time, and the mama mouse was still so thirsty, and she still didn't know what had happened to her first 3 children. So she asked her tiniest little mouse. She said, "Please, I'm still so thirsty. will you take this pail down to the creek and get us some water? But the tiniest little mouse said, "But Mama, I don't want to go. I'm afraid of the hairy, scary monster that lives in the cave." The Mama Mouse just looked at the baby and said, "Oh, don't worry. I'm sure you'll think of something." So the tiniest little mouse took the pail and they walked out of the house and down the hill towards the creek, when all of a sudden the hairy, scary monster yelled, "I'm gonna come out and get you." But the tiniest little mouse didn't get scared and didn't run away. Instead, the tiniest little mouse looked over to the cave and said, "Hairy, scary monster, you're not the scariest thing around. I'm not afraid of you." The hairy, scary monster didn't like that very much. It came out of its cave and it said, "What do you mean I'm not the scariest thing around? I am the hairy, scary monster." But the tiniest little mouse said, "I'm still not scared of you." So the hairy, scary monster looked at that tiny mouse and said, "Well, show me where the scariest thing lives then." The tiniest little mouse had an idea. They said, "The scariest thing lives up at the top of that tree." The hairy, scary monster had to see what it was, so it climbed as fast as it could up the tree to the very, very top. And while the hairy, scary monster was at the very top, the tiniest little mouse grabbed its tail and tied the hairy, scary monster to the tree. The hairy, scary monster looked down and said, "Hey, what am I supposed to do now?" And the tiniest little mouse just looked up and said, "I'm sure you'll think of something." Then the little mouse went down to the creek, scooped up the water, called over all their brothers and sisters, and all four of them went back to the house and handed their mom the pail of water. The Mama Mouse just looked at her babies and she said, "I knew you would think of something." And that's the end. Alright, so that was it. I hope you enjoyed that story. I know the part that I really like is it kind of follows a similar pattern that repeats. So it's fun because you can kind of guess what's going to happen next until the very end, when the tiniest little mouse gives us a surprise and finds a way to get past the hairy, scary monster. So I'm glad that I got to share that story with you, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. Bye!